this more obvious question. Are there investment companies and known investors that only target the creative economy?
The thing to think about when you're looking at targeting the creative economy, it's more than just a creator, right? Or a creative professional. You're looking at a business.
That's where I get all my energy from. From the stage to the studio and to my desk. I am the energy god. And you can be one too.
You're listening to Adeshokbe Live, the Afrobeats podcast.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to another edition of Adeshokbe Live, the official Afrobeats podcast, where we break down the hottest topics in the culture. And I'm joined by a special guest, one-on-one, to chop it up with me right here in the studio. As always, we appreciate the subscriptions, likes, comments. Click on the subscription button if you haven't done so now. Let's get the numbers going up. The bigger our platform gets, the better we're in position to support our own people without having to wait for others to do so. As always, this is brought to you by the Energy God Energy Drink. Drink and be yourself. Stay energized. And of course, Iconic Distro. Go to iconicdistro.com for any information about music distribution, content marketing, tech, global marketing. Just visit iconicdistro.com. And this special edition is brought to you by Taptap Send, the money app where you can make your quick, fast money transfers around the world. And that means you can send money to family and friends over in Africa as well. Guess what? That's what I use, and I've used it for a couple of years. So make sure you download Taptap Send and get sending money to family and friends around the world. Now, this is a special edition, hence sponsored by Taptap Send, because we're about to talk money and business. And I've brought into the studio a special guest of mine who is a financial investment consultant, a business consultant. We talk money all the time, business opportunities. My brother, Nzube. What's going on, brother?
Thank you, Shopsy, the energy god. Thank you for having me on set. Finally, I make it here. I've arrived.
Listen,
Mommy, I'm on the Energy God podcast.
But the thing is, I really wanted to open this whole type of conversation because I believe where we need to be having these discussions, not only once in a while, but more consistent now than ever. Of course, Afrobeats is where Afrobeats is. Currently, one of the biggest genres in the world. There's a lot of money being made specifically in the sales, streaming, and the live part of the music business, which means people are making money performing at shows and as also selling records and streaming. However, having someone like you as a friend, I realized that there are so many other areas within the ecosystem that Afrobeats artists and entrepreneurs are leaving a lot of money on the table. Am I right in saying that?
That's a really brilliant way to enter into this conversation. And yes, you are correct. So maybe I'll take a step back before commenting. So I'll just give a quick introduction.
Yes.
I'm, as you've mentioned, Nzube Ufodike. I'm an investor, an advisor, and I make some content too. So I do have a podcast, which is called Crowncast, Financial Literacy for SMEs. So do check it out.
So financial literacy for small
to medium-sized enterprises.
Exactly.
Because when it comes to building a business, you need to understand the financial element. So for this conversation, your question around working in the creative industries as a creative entrepreneur, how do you make sure that you're not leaving money on the table? That's a really important question. Yes, when it comes to creatives, I know you do focus more on the music sector, but I'll probably broaden some of my conversations to beyond just
the creative industry. The creative industry is a lot larger. We've got fashion, we've got film, we do have tech, we've got so many other aspects.
Design, there's photography, art,
for us,
gaming.
What has been projecting the African creative industry a lot more than usual in the last 3 or 4 years, particularly, has been the music. Hence why what brought us to this conversation. However, within that ecosystem, just as you said, there's a lot more in there. So
the
please
music
feel
has
free.
certainly been the most visible. I would say that fashion as well as our culture, from the festivals and cultural activities that are taking place around the world that are showcasing Africanness.
Yes.
There's a recent magazine publication that talked about the rise of the Nigerian British, individual, and how Nigerian Brits are elevating the game here in the UK. But coming back to the creative economy, I would say that the broad swathe of the creative economy do have some unique challenges and opportunities when it comes to finding the right financial partners. So if you think of it as getting the right financial partner versus raising money for your business, then I think that you're a step ahead of most. Because you're not really going cap in hand trying to beg for money. You're trying to find a marriage with a financial partner where the dynamics of their capital allocation strategy matches the dynamics of your business. So a capital allocator would want a certain return, for instance. They might have a certain risk profile. They might have a certain amount of money to put in. The specifics of their particular strategy, be it debt funding, equity funding, or any other type of strategy, has to match what it is that capital seeker is looking for.
Since you started there, can I ask this
Sure.
more obvious question? Are there investment companies and known investors that only target the creative economy?
Oh yeah, tons. There are tons. But
Is
the
it?
thing to think about when you're looking at targeting the creative economy, it's more than just a creator, right? Or a creative professional. You're looking at a business. So yes, on the one hand, you need to have a brand, have some visibility, have some traction, have some metrics that will demonstrate that you are a backable venture. But you're being seen as a business, not as just Adishokwe.
Yes.
You have
So
a brand, there's an extension to your brand.
Yeah.
And making sure that you have the right record keeping, the right, regulatory cover for your company, if it's a registered entity, a limited company, or a non-profit, whatever it is you decide is right for your company. All those things have to be in place. So you're coming at it, as a mature entity. It could be a startup, it could be a few months or a few years old. Again, the profile of your venture has to match the profile of the capital allocator, because different capital allocators have different risk profiles. So yes, there's something, and I'll name a couple. So for instance, one I had a conversation with last week, Impact X here in the UK, but they have a truly global strategy. Most of the companies they've invested in are around the UK, but 1/3 of the capital that they allocate is to the media and creative economy. And they allocate millions into businesses. So they're looking at things that are disrupting and elevating, the industry. Another one that's maybe more obvious and maybe more popular,
Yes.
although the fund size isn't the largest by any means, but Sony Innovation Fund. Last year, they announced a 10 million fund that's dedicated to the creative industries in Africa. So unlike Impact X I mentioned earlier, which has a slightly more global with a UK-centric focus, the Sony Innovation Fund have 10 million allocated to African. And this is part of their Sony venture. Sony Ventures invests hundreds of millions, but they've started to test and learn with the announcement that they made last year around the African creative economy. And they've made a couple of placements. They made a couple of placements before the vehicle was launched, but post-vehicle launch, one interesting one they invested in was Carry First. So Carry First is a gaming company that creates African titles, and it's got characters that you'd recognize. You and I grew up.
So they're using some of the characters that we grew up
Absolutely, not like
and then
Super Mario Brothers. There's
Exactly.
Italian plumbers.
I
but
love
we have
that.
local characters.
Now, you mentioned something. Since we're still part of the investment conversation, bookkeeping. How early can we, if you're a musician, for example, and you're just doing music, you're trying to, but ultimately you found yourself in a position where you think that it will be the perfect time to seek investment and stuff. However, your bookkeeping might not have been that well detailed. How soon must one really ensure that your bookkeeping?
I hear you. So I would say that, it's never too early to keep,
Records.
books. And those things help you as well to know what it is you're doing and where it is you're going and just how far you've come. You know, without some form of tracking, then how do you know what's there and what's not? What's your sense of reality? You might have a perception of what's in the bank or what assets or, you know, resources or, you know, digital tools you've got, but if it's not put in a specific file or folders, then it's harder to maintain for yourself as a business. So that's number one. Then for external people to get involved. And the way to think about it, right? Because if you're doing something that's just like a lifestyle, it's all about you, then you do it the way that works for you. It can all be in your head, and it doesn't really matter because whatever makes you function best is all well and good. However,
but you have to find the right partners to be able to.
If you're going to communicate with somebody else, not many people accept that.
Yeah.
Not many capital allocators.
Of
So
course.
what you need to do, if you can't speak to capital allocators, then get an intermediary, somebody that can capture that and translate that and document and keep it in a format that can be communicated to potential financial partners. Because without that sort of intermediary or translation, then
It'd be difficult for you.
you don't really have a business. What you have is a hobby, you have a lifestyle, you have a passion, but it's not a business. Business is all about a cash conversion cycle. Business is about making sure cash is coming in a way that makes sense for your venture.
Yep.
And then you're investing it and deploying and spending it in a way that makes sense. And then, you know, it's going all around, it's going round. And then you're building something. Whatever product or service you're doing is detail, but a business is all about managing your cash flow.
Cash flow.
That's
Turn
it.
around. Now, when I started, I mentioned the two clear aspects, particularly in the music business where people make money. Streams, sales, record sales, and live performances. However, there are a lot other areas that artists can, you know, look at to make money, whether it's merchandising, whether it's other types of placements. You haven't been in, you know, this creative economy conversations. What other areas should people be looking at, whether at the beginning when you don't even have a big name, or when you're at the top, when you do have a big name? We've seen Davido sign a deal with Puma. We've seen Wizkid, big brands. We saw Boss with Burna Boy. We've seen those type of things. It's easier when you're a big superstar. But what are the people on the ground just trying to go, you know, take a level up?
Good question. And I mean, first, yes, let's acknowledge that, you know, the traditional streams and the festivals.
Yep.
Shout out to Smade, who you introduced me to about 4 or 5 years ago,
Exactly.
a mutual friend. You know,
with Afro
what the
Nation
festivals
and
have
concerts,
done.
yeah.
Exactly. You know, they've elevated the game from artists being paid, 40, 50K per show at Afro Nation when it first began, to artists being paid in excess of $1 million.
Yep.
You know, so that trajectory in less than 5 years
It's crazy.
is very, very impressive. But that's, like you said, you know, the festivals and the performances, live performances are one way artists can make revenue. I'll say, when thinking about alternatives, depending on the brand name, you know, I would always recommend explore digital options, because you already have a degree of visibility, you have a fan base, you have a community. You want to look at ways to further engage and nurture that community. You know, the merchandising, we already kind of hinted on that point, but if you look at the example a few years ago when Travis Scott played on Fortnite, that was groundbreaking, right? In many ways.
My son was on me. He spent like £35 for me that day. He bought the skin. He bought the skins for the event. He bought the ticketing. He bought the skins. And that's how I heard about it. I didn't know nothing until my son was on my neck.
I have the opportunity there for other artists to extend their brand, use part of their IP, their intellectual property, in other media, right? So it's not just thinking of yourself, oh, I'm a singer and I have to perform or be on stage or live or rely on streams. You're a brand, right? You can do deals. You know, you alluded to the Puma deal. You can look at deals that are not just based on a fee, but give you some equity. So I'm sure most people have seen Air, the Jordan documentary. That was a brilliant masterclass on how to do deals, right? So when it comes to doing
Ownership.
deals, try and get some equity. So try and get some equity or revenue share.
Not always just about the cash up front.
Not just
Because we're Africans, you're an Igbo man. You already
I'm more
know.
Igbo. It's Igbo.
So you know cash is king.
Of
in
course,
these
without
areas.
cash is vanity. So you need the money, right? But at the same time, it's making sure if you take a hit on the front end, then you're exposing yourself to more upside, on the back end. There's always a trade-off. Nothing is free, right? But you need to figure out how to pull those levers in a way that is good for you as an artist. So thinking about revenue shares, thinking about equity in the actual product or solution that's being offered under your name, or creating a separate line. Those are things that artists can think about, And then also looking at things that are allied to your industry. It doesn't have to be within that. So you can extend into other areas depending on how creative the entrepreneur wants to express themselves. I think those that are natural hustlers will do stuff based on the relationships they have, the social capital they have.
Yeah.
It's very important to maintain that social capital because that's what leads to other opportunities. If you're transactional or you're always late or you're always like with a bad attitude, then it makes it less likely that people would want to work with you or want to engage with you for future opportunities. So thinking about that social capital in a very long-term way.
So it's also very important to have, I saw something on TV actually. I had to write it down.
Sure.
And I'll read it to you now. Yes, it was one of the actresses, I've forgotten who she was, that was speaking. She said, your gift and professionalism is what makes a lasting career.
Indeed. Was that Cynthia Erivo?
I think it was. I think I was watching. I'm not sure if it was Cynthia Erivo, but it was something around that.
Gotcha.
And someone was
absolutely
just saying
100% agree with that.
Professionalism, how important? Because a lot of people think once you're a big superstar, people will have to mess with you anyway.
That's when you start to go downhill, and that's when you quickly become forgotten. Because if people have to, but not because they want to, then there's certain things that will not bring your way because at that point they'll think, okay, hey, do I really have to go deal with that?
Deal with this
person?
guy?
Nah, I'm gonna pass on to the next. And guess what? There'll be other opportunities or other people that would be similar and could fit, and they would end up leveraging that opportunity instead of you that it was originally built around. So yeah, the attitude, how you engage, is part of that social capital that, as talent, is critical to maintain. The other thing, slightly tangential, but the other thing I'd also say with creative professionals, because many would have events that, trigger a lot of capital. So they would have a lot of money coming in, lump sums from deals, etc. Yeah. It's worth also thinking about investing, because it's one thing trying to rely on earnings. That can only go so far. And, even with the best careers, they do have a shelf life.
Absolutely.
So it's worth thinking about, okay, having a financial advisor, having a wealth advisor that sits with you and helps you map out how you deploy that capital.
I'm very happy that you've come to that. Yeah. Again, if you're just joining us, this special episode is brought to you by Taptap Send, an app where you can send money quickly, fast, reliable to friends and family across the world. Now, this is a consultant, Nzube, who's happy enough to come sit down with me on that. You're talking about investment.
Yes.
And having a wealth advisor or because that's probably a role that I don't hear as often as I would like to within, the Afrobeat culture world. Yes, we hear about managers, we hear about lawyers. How important is a financial advisor or wealth advisor to our creatives?
Oh, it's critical. If you don't have it, I don't think you have a business. But sometimes some of the wealth management / financial advisory roles or responsibilities fall under the business manager. So it's not that it's completely absent. It's just swallowed up by that kind of business manager role.
Yeah.
But it's critical. You need someone that does the spreadsheets, looks at cash flow, looks at, what assets, what liabilities you've got, and is able to, based on your P&L, your profit and loss statements, say, okay, we can afford that. No, we can't afford that. And helps direct excess cash into more tax efficient structures,
Yep.
helps direct things into other potential appreciating assets. So you might want to invest in things that would give you a potential return. So for instance, let me make up a random example. Well, based on, obviously, everyone knows Snoop Dogg does Just Eat adverts, right?
Yeah.
I don't know the details of that deal, but let's say in that deal where Snoop Dogg was doing the advert, he then decided, okay, I'm going to take a percentage of equity, right? So that's one part of his engagement with that Just Eat brand. So he takes some equity where he'll then have that as an investment. But then they pay him some cash. Then he'll take the cash and he'll say, okay, look, I'm going to invest in another tech startup. Then he goes and invests in maybe Klarna or invests in like 2 or 3 other companies that are in the tech space. And then he'll say, okay, look, I'm going to give you some cash, but I'm also going to give you some of my brand. So I'll do some adverts with you. So
visibility.
Exactly. So what he'll get would be a bit of exposure, some sweat equity and some stocks and shares for that cash. And that would allow him to diversify, because if you're a wealthy individual and you have all your assets in one asset class, then there's a bit of concentration risk, right? So it's better to diversify your kind of wealth base so that if something happens to one, you still have something else.
I saw an interview with what's his name? One of these big basketball superstars, the one with the beard. They call him the beard anyway.
Okay.
Recently, and he was speaking about Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant had advised him about 7-8 years ago to join him and invest in a company, a small unknown company at the time called Under Armour. So he invested about $500,000. Kobe invested a couple extra $1 million. In total, I believe they all invested about $7 million into Under Armour. And in 4 years, Under Armour sold for $7.5 billion.
There you go. There's so many examples like that. And I love that you brought that up, because in the US, they are a lot better at doing that. So Shaquille O'Neal invested in an unknown company called Google when it was very early in its days. And he made a lot of money from that as an angel investor. Serena Williams has invested in a few tech startups under the Serena Ventures brand. So she's now a VC, a venture capitalist. For those that don't know what a VC is, they're a type of risk capital allocator that come in early to companies that are looking to raise capital. They have a very different profile. So you only go to VC if you're trying to be in the business, or not just expand, because you could get expansion capital from a ton of other places.
Yes.
But you need to be thinking of expansion in a kind of Olympic way. You're not doing a micro expansion. It's like you doing a 5-a-side, going to the gym by yourself. That's not VC. You trying to go to the Olympics with a coach and a trainer, that's more VC. So there are different types of businesses, and VCs are very, very, they're inundated with applications, right? They see hundreds of companies.
Especially in the West.
I think all over the world, if you have capital, you see tons of deals. So I'm a capital allocator. I write small angel checks. I receive maybe 2 or 3 deals a day on average. People would say, hey, Nzube, we have this opportunity. Can you place capital in my company? And I'm like, usually, most times I say no, right? But, talk less of funds that are investing millions. They receive like 3-4 times the number of deals that I get every single day. So to get into the funnel for a VC, where they screen your application and then they have meetings and then decide to invest in you, is quite lengthy. It's quite long. It could take 6 to 9 months.
Because there has to be some thorough combing through to just see that.
There's that due diligence element, which does take maybe a couple of weeks, but it's more around just the volume of work the VC has.
Wow.
And, in terms of just prioritizing, right? So it does take some time. So that process is a bit longer.
It brings us to this other topic. You've got the creative investment. What's it?
Yes. We just had the Africa Creative Economy Summit.
Africa Creative Economy Summit. You've been doing this for a couple of years.
Yes, you helped us launch the first one. Do you remember?
Exactly, which was years ago.
It was in 2013.
Which is basically a summit where you bring organizations in, as well as people hoping and looking for investment, and people to have the opportunities to pitch to these organizations.
Absolutely.
You
So
know,
it's a
break it
two-sided
down.
marketplace. So what we're doing, taking a step back
Yes.
to what we did like 13 years ago, which
Yes.
we've pivoted slightly. But what we
Yeah.
did then was launch this Africa Creative Industry Investment Summit. And that was all about getting capital allocators to understand opportunities in the creative economy. So we're looking at the traditional verticals. You know, we've talked about film, fashion, music, you know, gaming, etc., and trying to make sure capital allocators knew how they could participate. We showcased a few companies. We had lots of talks from the private and public sector. You know, we had a few diplomats as well in attendance. And for us, it was very important. I was a co-founder of that venture, and it was important to just bring more people to understand the value within the creative economy. So we did that for a couple of years. The Africa Center was one of our partners and sponsors. That's how I actually got introduced to the Africa Center.
Yeah.
And, you know, since then, I've gone on to maintain that relationship with the Africa Center. But that's another story. So with respect to the
most
pivot,
recent one.
I moved away from that venture. So I left it with my colleagues to run that. It's been slightly dormant for a while, but I think they're bringing it up. But this one that I've co-founded again, this time with a French partner, is called the Africa Creative Economy Summit. So we just had the event recently, and for this, we're intentional about facilitating the deployment of £100 million into the creative economy across Africa, Caribbean, and the diaspora.
£100 million
pounds across the next 3 years. So we're looking for ventures that are within the creative economy. They have to be either seed, Series A or Series B. So they need to have some traction and some revenue and some, you know, something beyond, I have an idea.
Yeah.
You know, that doesn't cut it.
It should already be in
production, etc. So ideally, they need to be raising between $500,000 and $10 million. And then we'd love to work with them to figure out if we can find them the right financial partner. So we're not deploying the capital ourselves, but we'll be facilitating and working with the likes of institutions like Afrexim Bank. Afrexim Bank have committed $1 billion to the creative economy. So they have a fund that's
sitting there
for the creative economy.
We need Afrexim Bank. We need a cut of that, man. You know what I mean?
One of our partners for the event, and they have the Cultural Creative African Nexus, the CANEX, that also kind of
they just done
brings us
that
together.
Didn't they?
It's an annual event. So the one that took place in November, that was in Algeria. So
Yeah.
next year, if you're listening to this, make sure you check out CANEX and Afrexim Bank, November 2025. You want to go back to Algeria. That's going to be groundbreaking and very important for your business. So with ACES now, the Africa Creative Economy Summit, we brought a few investors into the room. We brought some entrepreneurs. And the conversations were, again, just identifying sort of the market-fitting structures that were appropriate for the creative economy. Yes. So thinking of things like film finance, where you have a schedule that might take several years to pre-produce, produce, distribute. So the cash flow from that is very lumpy. You pay a lot up front. You don't get your money till the end.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Most investors have a shorter time frame. So if you're investing from a VC fund, for instance, we talked about venture capitalists earlier, you typically have a 7-year cycle, right?
Oh.
But you need to be investing everything in the first couple of years and then harvesting in the last couple of years. So a VC can't fund the film because the match,
of the way,
it just doesn't match. But it was interesting. We had one of our speakers from TLG Capital who talked about some new financing structures that they have for film. And it depends on the type of film. So if you have a film that you're going to go into production with, but you already have a distribution deal with like a Netflix or one of the major platforms on Amazon or whatever, then they're able to they're able to fund that. It's not quite project finance. It's quite an interesting type of finance, but they fund that based on the distribution contracts that you have in place.
What a simple question I wanted to ask is, how versed do you have to be in this?
I know what you're gonna say.
Financial, educational, technical part before you can knock on someone's door to say, "Listen, man, we need some cash," or do we have to go to university before we can put this together?
No, the good thing is you don't have to go to university. So there are people whose jobs it is to be that intermediary, but you definitely need to speak the language.
Get somebody.
It's like saying, you speak Chinese and you want to go and deal with Russians, it's just two different languages. You need to learn how to speak Russian, or you get a damn translator. Sorry, can I swear in this thing?
Absolutely, fine.
But you need to get a translator. You can't go there, I speak Chinese, everybody knows it because I'm the biggest country in the world. No, it doesn't work like that. So whether you're the biggest star or the most talented individual, you need to speak the language of the investors. You can't speak Swahili to an Igbo man, right? You need to have that translation in between. So
somebody must come in to ensure that you.
So if it's not you doing it, then definitely have a business manager that does it for you, or finance director. So the most underrated role is a finance director. Worth their weight in gold. So get an FD. It could be a fractional FD.
Yeah.
So fractional means they only work for you for a couple of days a month as opposed to full time because they're very expensive. Or a CFO, a fractional CFO, that's a chief financial officer. That's critical. So apart from your marketing, sales, distribution, you need to have someone that's holding the numbers. If that's not you, right? Without that, you have no business. There's no way around it. There's no business without a finance person. There's no business. It's just a hobby. You're not ready yet.
Again, this is brought to you by Taptap Send, a money transfer app that you can send money quick, fast, and reliable to family and friends around the world. Bringing us to Taptap Send.
Yes.
The simple introduction provides a little bit of information, or the most important information for people to know. Like Taptap Send, just download the app. You can send money to friends and family around the world. But a more direct question to you is, what makes Taptap Send different from the million other apps that provide the same services of sending money to family and friends around the world?
Sure. Well, thank you for that question. Full disclosure, I am biased because I work with Taptap Send as an ambassador for the UK for Taptap Send. They're one of my clients, and I've been working with them for nearly a year now. So with respect to Taptap Send as a money transfer app, yes, it's fast, it's reliable, and it goes to most countries around the world. The speed is the key thing. The rates, when you compare that with the rates that you'd get from other platforms, that's another differentiator. But thirdly, and what really attracted me to the Taptap Send crew is more about their involvement in community. So they're more genuine about getting involved in community events taking place. So I can see a lot about what they've done here in the UK.
Yeah.
There's some things they've done in Nigeria too. I haven't got the list, but they do stuff there in Nigeria. Here in the UK, they've supported like the Women for Africa event. For a couple of years now, they've supported several community events, within the Ghanaian community, the Lusophone community.
And the Francophone community as well.
Francophone community.
Because that's how I actually got to find out about the app.
It's very important here because when you have community events here, we have the aunties, uncles, it can feel a bit isolating, having something that's, you're trying to tap into your Ivorianness, or and then it's hard to find spaces. So Taptap Send would help with small amounts that would help to get them places to host events, right, and become a stronger, richer community. There was even a jazz event that one Canadian-Nigerian lady came through. Well, she's actually not just a Canadian-Nigerian lady, a friend of mine that was around earlier in the year. We got involved in that. And there's so many other things that Taptap Send does. So that community engagement, I think, is a key element to its differentiation.
I just think that the it being seamless and very comfortable, easy and quick for me. I've got my bank card.
Exactly. You use it a lot. So tell me, why do you continue
I've used it for years. And it's simple because I've attached my bank card to it. It's got a security. I've got facial recognition on that. I put my bank card attached to it. I need to send money to family quickly. I punch the number in pounds. It tells me instantly how much it is in Naira or cedis in Ghana. I press OK Send, and within seconds, the person is calling me to say thank you.
Absolutely.
And
it's really
usually
easy.
Before then, I was one that had intermediaries, people where you would send money to them and they would give family and friends back home. They had their own exchange rates. They had their own different...
You have to call 5 different people and get the best rates.
Exactly.
Yeah, this saves you all that time. Even me personally, I remember one time I was on a bus. I had to pay on my colleagues who was in Lagos. And I literally brought up my phone, a few taps, and I was able to make a transfer. So things like that. Real life case studies, like you've also shared about your own story. It's very simple to use. So that's why I would recommend people use Taptap Send. And one thing I would also offer, promo code for anyone that wants to take advantage of Taptap Send, they can use ATP03. So that's Alpha Tango Papa 03.
And what does that give you?
I'll give them an additional £5 credit on the first money transfer that they make on the app.
ATP03.
That's the one.
ATP03. That's the promo code.
Check in the links for
that. Finally,
yes,
and more importantly as well,
please,
can people solicit your service as either a financial advisor, whatever it is in this weird world where we have to have conversations? Do you have services?
It
that
would
people
be a
can
privilege to help. So I'm a business consultant. That's my day job, right?
Yeah.
So always helping businesses with their fundraising, with their strategy in any way that they need support with growth. I have a couple of clients, some of who and so far haven't had too many complaints. So we raised over 50 million for companies in our portfolio, mostly tech, but we also have done some things in the creative economy. I've invested myself as well. I've got about 12 companies I've invested in. The aggregate valuation of the companies that I've deployed capital into, not the share that I hold, but the companies themselves, is worth over 150 million. And the revenues combined is about 15 million. So I do have experience working within the startup space for the last 10 to 15 years. So happy to lend that knowledge to anyone that thinks it would be useful for their strategy. I'm happy to grab coffee, virtual preferred, but happy to grab a virtual coffee with anyone that wants to just pick my brain.
And where can people get information about you?
The first place would be LinkedIn. That's where I have my Calendly link. So you'd see my Calendly link. Just click and book a time. We can catch up.
And so that you can tell when you're free and when you're
available.
It's
integrated with my calendar, so that just helps. Otherwise, my colleague can help. So their email is ea@amu.co.uk. So that's EA, Executive Assistant, at Alpha Mike Oscar Oscar.co.uk, ea@amu.co.uk, and my colleague would help with booking a time. But you could just use my Calendly link and it would be the best way to schedule time with me.
Listen, like I said, this is going to be the first of very many conversations. I feel we're ripe, more than ripe and ready for these serious conversations to be had. A lot of us, you're going to have to hold our hands and walk us through almost like the kindergarten. Basically.
You guys are holding up the culture. You guys are doing a lot that's helping keep us proud of where we're from.
Yes, but
right?
now it's time for us to
get the money.
Get the money and also be educated enough that our kids can walk into systems that are more structured than we had to walk into. Do you understand what I mean? And I believe people like yourself, with your experience, your knowledge, and your day-to-day job, have what it takes to assist a lot of us within this industry attain that. So, Nzube will be on the Afrobeats podcast more often.
I'm coming back, yay!
You are. So thank you very much.
Will I be allowed to drink the
Absolutely,
energy god drink?
Let's just go for it, man. Once again, this was brought to you by Taptap Send, the easiest and quickest way to send money fast to many countries around the world, especially if you got friends and family like me in West Side of Africa. Until next time, it is cheers
to the
and we're out.
Nice to see you. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share. Smash that subscribe button. Now.
Easy. I appreciate it, man.
The Afrobeats Podcast.
Right.